Did you know there's a way to seed your microgreen trays up to 4 times faster? With the world's fastest handheld microgreen seeder, the Little Green Seeding Machine, you can seed up to 300 trays per hour thanks to our unique quick seed technology. That's 4 times the speed of hand seeding, giving you back precious time to focus on growing your business or spending time with family and friends. But it's not just speed. The Little Green Seeding Machine seeds more evenly and accurately, reducing the risk of disease and boosting your crop yields. You'll grow healthier microgreens with less effort. It works with nearly every microgreen variety. Plus, it's designed by farmers for farmers, with an ergonomic design that's easy on your body, so you can say goodbye to those long hours of hand seeding. Want to know how much time and money you can save? Click the link below and find out today. It's time to grow smarter.
Welcome to the Microgreens Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Jonah Krochmalnek. Together, we'll explore the art of turning tiny seeds into a thriving microgreens empire, sharing insights, coveted secrets, and strategic wisdom from building one of Canada's largest microgreens farms. Stay tuned for thought-provoking conversations with leading figures in the world of microgreens.
Welcome to the podcast, everyone. On today's episode, we have Kyle McNaughton of Spartanburg Microgreens in South Carolina. Kyle started his microgreen business part-time 3 years ago, and in early 2024, he went in full-time on the business. Since then, he has tripled production in the last 12 months and is recently undergoing an expansion into his garage where he plans to grow 15 racks of microgreens. Kyle shares a ton of wisdom on transitioning from being an employee to entrepreneurship, balancing running a business while raising 5 children, and the strategic decisions he's made on production processing that allowed him to triple his business this year. I'm really excited for you guys to hear Kyle's story and the gold nuggets of knowledge shared in this episode. Let's get right into it. Hey, Kyle, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Excited to talk to you.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I know we've been chatting for quite a while now, but for anyone that's new to your microgreens farm, I'd love to kind of hear how you got interested in microgreens and the backstory of how Spartanburg Microgreens became a farm.
Yeah. So we actually moved to Spartanburg. My wife is from Spartanburg. We moved from California to Spartanburg over a decade ago, and one of the reasons we moved back here was we wanted to kind of get involved with growing and farming. And I've been reading a bunch of Joel Salatin stuff and got all excited about it. And life kind of hit, and just years passed by, and hadn't done much. But I had kind of heard about microgreens, and they were sort of in the background of my mind for several years. And then it was actually the Freedom Farmers course that you taught that kind of popped up, and I was like, well. And then I finally said, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try it. So I bought the course and started with it. And it's kind of been, the rest is history from there. It's been almost 2.5 years now of selling microgreens. And we started the course a little earlier than that. So just close to 3 years of messing around with microgreens. And so it's been a lot of fun, and definitely have come a long way from the start of that course. So it's exciting to kind of look back on it and see where we've come and what we've done so far. So
yeah, for sure. And like you started about 3 years ago. And last week we chatted. You're actually making a move from. So you started first of all part-time with the microgreens business, yep, and have moved to full-time. And then also you're now transitioning from growing in your house to taking over the garage, which is a much larger space than your current space.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, for the first, we started the beginning of 2024 full time with microgreens, and was a little scary making the jump. And I thought, well, we'll see how it goes. We'll do 6 months, and now I sort of blink, and it's been almost a year. So it's gone fast, and we're still here. So it's good. But yeah, we've about tripled our production over this year. And wow. Then we're hoping to probably do another doubling of it next year. But we're we've had to get a little creative lately with fitting stuff into the room we're in. So it's like, okay, I think it's time that we gotta do this on a bigger scale. So yeah, we're going to move everything out of the house. We're in the process of doing that and going to move it down to the garage, take over the garage, which that's been one of the bigger challenges too, because since we're growing in the house, it's still there's a lot of stuff I do in the garage, so I have to kind of figure that stuff out. So always fun to put all pieces together. But yeah, excited about where we're going to go in 2025 for sure.
That's incredible. The fact that you were able to grow like triple the size of your production in 1 year is a great sign. And what's nice is now you've learned the skill set on how to do that. And obviously you learn like throughout the cycle of your business, no matter where you are, there's always lots of opportunity to learn and grow and understand how to run a business better and better. But it's usually a pretty good sign when you can grow quite fast like that and do it sustainably. And it's great to see that that you're able to take over like a larger space without incurring the costs of renting a space. So it's a good like middle ground that you have the space available, because not everyone has the capacity to move from like a room in their house to a bigger space. But it's a great middle ground just to like increase production. But one thing I wanted to ask you is like, what are kind of the challenges in moving into that space as you've kind of gone more into the process of doing it?
Yeah, definitely. So I've taken a note from you and several others that I've talked to about, really thinking about it less of in that process mindset of, analyzing what you're doing and where are our bottlenecks and how can we fix those? How can we make those better? And, what can we maybe not compromise, but what can we make more efficient, and what do we need to, absolutely need to do this way? And we've experimented with things and tried it. And that's one thing is like, it seems like you kind of get something settled and then it's like, well, what if we tried this? And then you try that and it's like, oh yeah, that works better. So it's always new and exciting. It's something, in my mind sort of working like, well, what if we tried this one? So, the biggest challenge I think has been with growing maybe as quickly as it is it does seem like as soon as you sort of get to okay, this is kind of working, we got a system going, and it's like, oh, well, we need to add another rack, or oh, we need to add more lights, or whatever, and it's like or this germination process isn't working, or the seasons have changed a little bit, and now all the process that was working is it's getting too hot in the room, or it's not getting warm enough, or whatever. So it's I think some of those micro adjustments is kind of where it can be challenging, but also fun, because it's never like, okay, plug, press play, and then that week is done, and then the next one, so it keeps for me anyway, it keeps the burnout from happening, because it's just like as soon as you get sort of, and it's happened to me a couple of times, you get a little lax. And then all of a sudden you get a bad germination, or you get, all of a sudden you walk in the room in the morning and the crops are all drooping. You're like, whoa, what happened? I thought this was working. So, you got to keep your eye on it and focused on it, but also sort of looking ahead and figuring stuff out. So it's been, like I said, exciting, challenging sometimes, but exciting as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like whenever you move to a new space, like I've experienced this. I think I talked about this on the podcast before, when we had one industrial unit and then we expanded into a second one. The microclimates in that space were actually different, even though they're both like rectangular boxes of like pre-built, but like just having like our cooler in a certain spot affects the airflow, or having our soil room that's kind of enclosed to prevent the dust from getting on the crops. Like these things that it's hard to fully predict how something like airflow or humidity or temperature will move in a space. So then you get these like microclimates similar that you get in nature when there's like a hill blocking a wind or something, and then it can be warmer, or it's a southern exposure. You have the same kind of thing. But what's nice is once you figure out the new space, it's pretty much just like rinse and repeat. It's like the way I think of it is like a factory. So like if you can make like these water bottles as an example, you should be able to reproduce it over and over again once you figure out all the kinks in the system. So that's what I've noticed is like whenever there's expansion or change, there's always some minor things that kind of get out of whack, and then you just have to kind of figure out the best way to keep them in line. And then once it's in line, over time, less and less of those challenges happen until the next iteration, which would, I guess, at that point be like an industrial space. But the fact that you can save a significant amount of money on rent, and whether you pay yourself with that or you reinvest in the business, is a huge benefit, because you're paying rent on that garage, whether you're using it or not, right? So
that's right.
Yeah,
that for sure. And I had toyed with, okay, do I try to move, because I need the garage for the house and that sort of thing. And that was some advice that you gave me earlier on, is looking at this and path forward and all that sort of thing. And so that was kind of my conclusion as well. Is just this is the least expensive way for me to expand and be able to build. And even with the amount of growth that we could have in that garage, it's going to set us up for being able to sustain ourselves as we move to that next stage. So yeah.
And I believe we also talked about, like, I can't remember what the ceiling height was in the garage, but a lot of people are growing on the standard 6 rack 5 level setup. But for people that have 8 foot or potentially even higher ceilings, you can get more levels in the same space. You start having to use a ladder at that point, or at least a small ladder. But like, it's a way for people that are in their house, and electricity is not the limiting factor, but the actual amount of trays they can grow is. That's like a good stepping stone, is just like getting taller racks that go up to 8 feet. And that allows you to get more production out of the same space.
Yeah. So I've been talking with Garrett at Piedmont Microgreens, because he just moved out of the garage into the industrial space. So I picked his brain for a little while, and which is great too. It's great to have guys like you, Garrett, and everybody that I've talked to has just been very open, and everybody's really excited about making this move forward, which is great. It's good to have that kind of community beyond just yourself, because it's easy to kind of get in your own tunnel and be like, I'm doing it this way or whatever. And you just, every time I talk to somebody, you learn something, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, let's try that. You may adjust it or whatever. But yeah, so talking to him is like, okay, how can we use this space, which is bigger, but it's not like huge. Like, how do we use this and get get as much of our production in there as we can? So the thing I'm most excited about, I think, is because where I've been growing is upstairs. It's above the garage, so it's in a bonus room above the garage, and so I've done everything I can to keep as much as I can in the room of the process. But washing trays, even like carrying stuff down, like there's those stairs, man, they can be brutal. So I'm excited about moving in the garage, having everything on one level, and thinking through that, like how can I change it? I've got the outside is right there, instead of having to lug things up and down from upstairs. So yeah, that's probably the thing I'm most excited about. Other things too, but that's the one I'm like, okay, we're going to get rid of those stairs. That's good.
I know exactly what you mean. Like it's with and this is why I mentioned like the factory, like trying to view it as like a production facility rather than like, a farm in a traditional sense. Right. Because, something as simple as the way you pack the microgreens. So I always try to tell people, like, it's always better to put more in the clamshell, so you have one movement to take it out. And if you just think about, if you do it where like you put a little bit less in and then you have to do 2 motions, let's say it takes an extra, like, even if it's just like 2 seconds, and then you multiply that by like every harvest once or twice a week for multiple years as you expand, like you're talking about like hundreds, maybe more hours that are just wasted from like one little tiny change or lack of change potentially in how smooth or efficient your process is. So stairs is obviously an inefficient thing, but at the same time, it's like, does it make sense to go up and down the stairs or not grow like the product? And obviously there's always limitations. So for example, in industrial spaces, some people's limitation is not having floor drain, which limits the way you water. So as example, that's something that if you don't get a floor drain when you expand into a commercial facility, then you're limited in how you water the crops. Like it's a lot harder to automate the watering, and there's more risk of like flooding and stuff because there has to be a catch basin, which also wastes space. So it's like sometimes these simple things that make such a big difference, and that's why I'm a big believer in like process and focusing on that, because in each individual task, it may not sound like that much of a difference, but when you expand the time horizon to like a year, it can be a lot of time that you save.
It's amazing when you do those calculations, and so you think, it's not that big a deal, and then somebody does it for you real quick, and you're like, oh, that's a considerable amount of time.
yeah, totally.
So,
it can really make a difference, but from our conversation we had, it seems like you're moving in the right direction, and the garage is obviously helping with that significantly. Because stairs are like to go up and down lugging like anything, like bags of soil or like empty trays after they're harvested. It's a workout.
Yes. Yeah. And when I first started, I was carrying the dirt down. You fill up, you can only do so many trays I was using those, Rubbermaid containers.
Yeah.
And then I started having a problem where the Rubbermaid containers weren't holding up because it's too much weight.
Wow.
And it's like, but of course when you're doing, 10 trays or that, it's not that big a deal, but, started adding up. So, I don't know if it was your suggestion or someone else's, but, there's a window in the room that goes out over the side of the house. And it was like, why don't you try dumping out the window? And I was like, yeah, okay. And then I've been doing that now for probably, at least a year and a half. And that makes a huge difference because it's just being able to get that dirt out without, having to be a major lug up and down those stairs was a huge, huge deal. So and that's the interesting thing too, is it's, I think the biggest mindset shift for me is not just being like, well, this is the way it's got to be, but like identifying those things, this is how it is. And then how do we fix that? How do we solve that? And then like actually being able to fix it and solve it. So that's one thing that's been exciting about having more control over the whole, operation from start to finish. So, yeah.
And that's also a big benefit of really planning at the early stages. Because what I see, unfortunately, really often in the microgreen space is people expand. And then by the time they've gone through a major expansion, they're I don't want to say they're not stuck in the ways, but like they're more resistant to change because they see it works. And the more ways you try things, or the more things you try in the beginning, it really opens your mind to like there's many different ways to do it. And sometimes even small incremental changes can make a big impact, especially when you're growing hundreds of trays a week instead of like 10, 20 trays when you're starting out.
Absolutely.
And so in terms of products, so you started with a Freedom Farmers course, which in that course we teach people to start with like the 4 basic beginner crops, which are radish, sunflower, pea, and broccoli. So since that time, have you expanded into more crops and new audiences as well?
Yes, absolutely. So I kept it, and I kept hearing this refrain from people about, you don't need that much to start. You don't need that much to start. And I do think that's true. And I definitely kept it very small for a long time, pretty much with those 4. I did radish by itself. That was kind of one addition, which wasn't really a huge adjustment because I was already growing it. And then I added like a brassica blend, which I call immunity booster, which has kale and wasabi mustard in it. So that was a couple more, but they were it was a blend, so it wasn't if one grew better or the other. So I was kind of I was trying to do stuff that was on that same schedule and was pretty similar with what I was doing with the other 4, and that worked well. And then the start of this year, I really ramped up our commercial restaurant business and selling to restaurants and that sort of thing. And so that kind of led to expanding what we were growing. And I still, my goal with each new crop as I bring it in is, can it fit into this process that I have, and the system that I have? So if it doesn't, if it's close, then I'll try to tweak it and see what I can do to fix it. But I don't want to have like these one-off crops that it's like, well, I need to do this day and this day and that sort of thing. So, even with some of the longer ones, like I've got cilantro going, and then some basils that I'm very slowly introducing, because even those are it's just enough different and longer with those that I want to make sure I can deliver a consistent crop, but I want to also make sure that I'm not just running myself ragged trying to do a bunch of stuff every day. So I'm trying to keep it as economical or efficient in the process to where everything kind of fits into it. But yeah, so those I've added, and then a few other microgreens. A couple different radishes, doing popcorn, amaranth, and nasturtiums is another one that was kind of, I didn't expect it to I sort of tried it, and then I had a lot of people be interested in it. So I try to add kind of more, I guess, exotic ones, but just different stuff to kind of appeal to what restaurants were looking for and what they were asking for. There's more that I've tried, and there's a few that I've kind of walked away from, and so I'm still trying new stuff, but trying to keep everything again in that bucket of it's working for me rather than I'm working for it, I guess is what the best way to say that.
For sure. And that's also great that that like you're kind of assessing where the demand is in the market, because like for example, I never found in my market that nasturtium was really popular. But the fact that you're finding in your market and be able to meet that demand now is a sign that, rather than just like doing what, me or other educators in the space say, it's like actually finding out what's in demand in your market and meeting that demand. And that's where like, there's always little niches in different areas. And that's great that you're able to grow that crop, because it's a pretty good yielding crop. The seeds are quite expensive, but it's also a really cool looking crop. It's such a unique, like lily pad looking crop. And I haven't heard, I've done testing with it years ago, but I haven't heard many growers doing it on a larger scale. So it'll be interesting to see how that scales up as you scale up the business in the garage and where the demand's coming from. That'll be really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the customer type, so again, in the Freedom Farmers course, we teach selling direct to consumer. But at the same time, that's not always the most long-term sustainable. It's a great way to start a microgreens business because it's the lowest barrier to entry. But as you scale, it's hard to do like 200 or 2,000 different customers. So how did that transition look like for you? And then where's it kind of at now in terms of who your biggest customers are?
Yeah. So we've the numbers change a little bit from week to week, but it's roughly a third of direct delivery consumer, and then markets and grocery stores, that kind of wholesale retail model, and then commercial. So I wanted to keep a balance, and I know some I've talked to some farms and they're sold out on restaurants, or some are sold out on kind of farmers markets and doing that. And I think there's a market for both. And it's different, which that's been a little bit of a challenge, is making sure I'm selling what we're providing to both, needs and appealing to both types of customers. But I think you get volatility in both spaces. And I think it's so having a little bit of both and getting feedback from people on both has been beneficial, I think. So understanding what appeals to that direct consumer, or to even on the wholesale side, like why people are going into the grocery store to buy microgreens. It may be different than the commercial accounts, but it's also there is overlap. And I think just understanding it, well, I don't really like the flavor of this. Okay, well, that's probably gonna play out a little bit on the restaurant side too, right? And you have, I think, that feedback from the person that's eating at a restaurant, as well as from the restaurant. They're looking for maybe the color and this, but then being able to tell them, we've had a lot of feedback that people like this flavor, or this goes really well with this, and just being able to provide that back to the restaurants too. So I think it's good to have both sides. And again, the challenge has been, where do you spend your time? And I've tried to be balanced, but there is, sometimes you're really more focused on like, okay, we're, going to talk to restaurants and do all our sales efforts for restaurants, and then switch it over. Okay, we're going to really focus on how do we talk to, get direct to consumer and subscriptions and those sorts of things. So I have resisted the farmer's market. We have, we just had our fifth baby child last couple months ago now. So we're very busy at the house.
Yeah.
So being able to knock everything out in one day for commercial and retail and everything in kind of one day is helpful. And kind of just to be able to, leave in the morning, go drive around, and then come home and be done has worked for us. I've sort of toyed with the idea of doing the farmers markets just from a matter of getting out there and getting the name out there more so I think than the sales side, but I've sort of resisted it so far. So we'll see. It may be something that comes up in 2025. I don't know.
Yeah, the like farmers markets are a really great way to gather data on that side of customers. It's because you're directly engaging with them. The same customers will come back, give you feedback. It's probably the best way to get that data. But it is the most time consuming way to sell products. So there is that trade-off, but like the data can really help drive the business forward. If there's like let's say there's some niche that's not being met in your market. Let's say like arugula microgreens, no one's growing it, but like you just keep selling out at the farmer's market. It's like a pretty clear sign that like, okay, you can sell a ton of this at the grocery store, and it could be a way to get into grocery stores, having that data, and then having immediate success, selling to the store and wanting to progress with you. Potentially it's a chain or whatever it is. So there's a lot of opportunity there. But this is the one thing I really love about entrepreneurship and just like hearing you talk about, like, you have a 5 kids. It's a lot. Like it's a big responsibility. You're running a business, but what's nice is that you get to choose how you structure the business, what types of customers you take on. Like you get to choose how the business operates. There's no one else that can tell you that, right? So like you can create the lifestyle. So if you want to do everything in one day a week and that works well for you and your family, like no one can tell you no, like it's really, really nice. That's my personal favorite thing about entrepreneurship. Like, you work really hard and sometimes you work really long hours, especially in the beginning years. But the freedom you get to like do what you want and how you want to do it is very liberating. Like just from like a, as a human, like for me as like a human being, but then as in running the business, it's something that, you had a job prior to this. And I'd love to hear what the kind of transition looked like for you in the sense of like what things you enjoy about being a full-time entrepreneur versus working for a company. And it'd be interesting for people that might be like on the fence to kind of hear your experience. And
Absolutely. Yeah, I will say, you hear this everywhere, but like you got to get out of the employee mindset and into the owner mindset. And I think that is more real than people realize until you've done it. Like it's almost like you have to step through that door before you're able to get there. There's a guy on he's on YouTube, but he's everywhere, Dan Coe, that's big about people starting their own, doing solo entrepreneurship. And I've watched some of his stuff because it's very interesting. He's very, very thoughtful about his stuff. But he said something which I thought was very interesting, and I think it's very true. If you go to a job, you're working for a job, the structure is set for you, and there's kind of comfort in that. And I think people like structure. And I think maybe a misconception about entrepreneurship and where it can be dangerous for people is if you don't realize that structure is important. The difference is you're building the structure for how it works best for you. So if you don't build that structure, then it can turn into a mess. And I think it does for a lot of people. And so the biggest challenge, I think, for me has been, that whole idea of choosing yourself, or setting that self for your, setting it for yourself, and not just being like, oh, this thing has, I got to get up and do this. I got to get up and do that. There's so much to do. And it's like building that structure out and understanding, like you set that for yourself. It's very liberating, but it's just challenging to understand that, like, it's okay to do that. Right. And it's okay. Like if you don't want to work on, Wednesday mornings, that's okay. You don't have to, you're not proving anything to anybody except yourself. Right. Like you get to set what that looks like. And so that's an exciting part of it. I think that, it just takes a while at least it did for me. It takes a while of experiencing that, and then being okay, and then realizing, like, the other side of that is, if you don't do it, it doesn't get done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah.
like, having that responsibility, that's kind of the scary part of it. But and it's interesting how critical we are of ourselves, but then also like how, and I guess I can only speak for myself, but also how much we'll sort of let other people's priorities control ours. And, when you take that chain off, it's hard to kind of, you sort of like the horse that's trained not to move, you don't want to move. And then it's like, oh yeah, I can just walk down the road right there.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been a transition, still learning, still growing, doing lots of reading on that front, and practice, practicing it and that sort of thing. So it's, it is always new, and it's always exciting, and it's always challenging, but I think it's just, it's like one little level of a video game at a time, right? You kind of beat it and you go to the next one, and then it's like, oh, okay. And then, now we got to deal with this. And then, you beat that one, you go to the next one. And I think it's, thinking about it like that, and having kind of fun with it is important, because it can get sort of bogged down if you don't. And having the opportunity to do that and kind of actually progress and not just stay on the same level, forever is that's the sort of exciting part of it, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's incredible advice. I think like it's a hard transition from working to running a business for the reasons you stated, but just even from my personal experience, like, one thing I noticed is I went from school pretty much to Microgreens. I had a few summer jobs, and I had like a job right out of school. So I was less conditioned. So I was able to condition myself, but I got so conditioned in the microgreens cycle that when I sold the business and started, doing more consulting and building a little green seeding machine, it was actually quite a difficult transition, because I had, like, microgreens give you quite a bit of structure. It's self-disciplined structure, but it's like a routine that's the same week in, week out. So once, like, it was a similar thing where people have that with work. I had the same thing, but with a microgreens business. Right, and then once those walls were, the glass was shattered on not doing that on a routine basis, then it was hard to structure myself in a different way. So it's not just like running a business. It's also when you do something for so long in a specific way. So and even the same thing, like, building new habits, new routines is difficult, no matter how old you are or what your skill level is or anything like that. Repetition, it's like, you lift weights at the gym. The more you do it, the easier it gets. So your mind is the same way. Like, you can be like, oh, like, I really like, you could be struggling to do some aspect of the business, because you're not going to love everything. No one loves everything about their job, and no one loves everything about running a business. But the more you can reframe, what the task is, or find a new way to do it, like hire someone to do it, or, make it, like, for example, like I'm sure you did not enjoy taking the soil down the stairs. And then once you found a new way to do it, it's like, it's like almost like a chain that breaks, like a mental block, and then it opens up your mind to, like, new possibilities, and having it happen in one part of your business allows it to happen more in other parts. So it's the same thing, the repetition of having mindset shifts, the more you do it, the easier it gets. And then at a certain point, it just happens like on autopilot. And
Yeah.
you make these decisions without even thinking about it that are beneficial for you or the business.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. It's so interesting how something that is so difficult when you start, whatever it is, I mean, any task that you're doing, and then, all of a sudden you look up and it's been, 6 months or a year of doing it, and you're not thinking about it anymore. And it's like, oh yeah, that's just become part of something that I do. And it's amazing how much that your brain can, like, when you first are using up all that energy of doing it, it's like this massive thing on your mind. And then, before you know it, it's, like driving, you start driving and it's you're thinking about every turn and all that. And then, all of a sudden you've been doing it for 10 years and you don't even think about it. You just put the key in the ignition and go. So, it's amazing how the brain can do those things and sort of store some of those things for you, and keep them, make them easier. And like you said, I think too, though, it's easy to get in that routine, and then you got to have those challenges, those sort of barriers that, like, and then you sort of get that exponential growth, to kind of get that doubling, and then go from there. So, it's a lot of fun. It is. I think it doesn't seem like it sometimes, but
So
it's
always looking back. It's always easier looking back. Yeah,
exactly. It's like sometimes with like even with playing sports or whatever, like, you're in the middle of it and you're like, why are we doing this? This is crazy. It's like beating your head against the wall. But when you're done, you're like, man, that was a lot of fun. And like, you're not doing it anymore. And you're like, man, I really kind of miss this, doing that stuff. So, so it's interesting for sure.
Yeah. One tidbit of advice I've got from my business coach, which has made a big difference in how I view, I'd say, just the world, but also business, is the more like meaning that, like, in the sense of like the more meaning you can create in what you're doing, the easier it is to actually do those things. Because, like, if there's, and this, people call it the why, like why you're doing it. But you can also take like the big picture and then kind of take it down to like smaller tasks. And as long as in the back of your head, why you're doing it and the meaning that's created. Sometimes it could be like, okay, I'm doing this for my family, or I'm doing this to like feed people like the highest quality food. That's what drove me for like a very long time, was like, I want people to eat actual high quality food, because, as I've traveled the world, I've seen that North America is very unique in how processed food is, and how much, problems, with health and just society have been caused by the food we eat. So, like, microgreens are, like, I've never heard of anyone that's been like, microgreens aren't actually healthy for you. Like, I've never heard it, like, because there is no data to prove that it's not. So it really is a superfood. And if you truly believe in the product and like how you're helping people, by eating a healthier diet that's higher in nutrition, it just, for me, that's what made it easy. But it doesn't have to be that. It could be any sort of thing. It could be the freedom you get from running the business. It could be like the story that, like, one of your customers gave you of like how much they like enjoyed the experience of eating their microgreens and sharing it with their family or whatever. There's so many, like, all that matters is the meaning is associated with you, and like, you feel a connection to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And that's what I think is missing in a lot of people's jobs, is there's like a disconnect between what they're doing and the meaning behind it. And that's where, entrepreneurship, generally, it's more aligned, not always, but it's generally more aligned, I've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like, with sailing or whatever, if you've got a course that you're pointing toward, and you may tack this way and that way and this way and that way, but where you're going, right? You have to, make your tactics change to be, how you're trying to get to that long goal. But that course that you're going to really sets kind of everything that you do. And, every decision you make is based on that larger goal. I think that's great. I heard, I think it was Joel Salatin that said this. Somebody asked him, how do you prevent burnout from farming? And he said, you just need to get a bigger vision. And I think that's I've come back to that several times, like when I'm feeling like, oh man, another week of this, another week of that. And it's like, yeah, you just gotta get your head up out of it a little bit and realize why you're doing things. And it makes a big difference, I think. So that's been one I've held on to in the back of my head when I'm getting caught up in it, for sure.
That's a great one. Yeah. And also I've noticed that like when you have that direction or vision or the why that's really clear in your mind, and the main thing is you have to believe it. Like like if you just say it, it's one thing, but you have to like truly believe it, which is where like I think most people that are growing microgreens are, maybe they might be doing it to make a profit, which is not a bad thing. But like at the end of the day, there's many different ways to make money. So it's not really solely about that. It's about like,
there's probably easier ways to make money too.
Yeah, there's definitely easier ways to make money. There's also a lot of harder ways to make money too.
True. That is true. Yes.
Like in my mind, having a job that it's really hard to wake up in the morning to go to, even if it pays you 10 times as much, like that is harder. And like when you love what you do, like these really hard things are a lot easier. And that's where like when you're talking about the ship, like you get off course, when you really love what you do, it's a lot easier to like not have it have such a big impact on your like psychology or a mental state, because like you're going for something that you truly believe in. And it's something that like honestly, I there's no way I could have gone through 10 years of running and growing a microgreens business without that, like 0% chance. And I think most people in the microgreen space and just farming in general, like most people that get into farming, they're doing it because they believe in growing food for people and feeding people.
Especially these days, I think that is the most exciting thing about, especially small scale agriculture and where we are right now. It's just, I mean, that was kind of what got me excited about it, a decade ago, was like, wow, this is actually pretty cool. And like seeing all this stuff all works together, and, anyway, but yeah, that I think is very, very true. I think the more connected you are to that, even if it's a far way away, as far as, the goal you're reaching for, it helps a lot, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Getting back to production, I'm just curious of like what the max capacity you think you'll have in the garage, and like how long do you think it'll take you to obviously there's always an estimate, but how long do you think it'll take you to get closer to capacity with that space?
Yeah. So I have been, everything I've done so far has been the 6-foot shelves with 5 growing racks. So I'm experimenting a little bit with being able to fit one more rack on there. I know a couple people that are doing that. One more shelf on there. So going 6. So I'm working with that some, and then the higher racks too. So I'm kind of, that's something that I haven't really messed with so far. And so I think that's one piece that's going to be, how much can I grow on a rack is the first piece to solve. What I'm targeting is at least 15 racks in the garage. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. I've talked to people that have done up to 18, and maybe I'll be able to do that. I don't know, but we'll see. That depends on how we'll see when we get there. So I'm planning for that. I'm trying to map everything out in there and figure out how to do it. And like I said, try to keep as much as we can in there, so it's not just a growing space. Like I can do the rest of the product harvesting and packaging and all that stuff right there in that room. Some of the dirtier stuff, soil trays and that sort of thing, probably do outside, washing trays. But like even that, like trying to economize that, and I've been kind of working on how do I create these pathways. So that there's, it makes sense. Like, okay, there's a logic to kind of how you move even within the farm. But so I'm not exactly sure, but that my goal is to do 15 racks and then hopefully do more on each rack. So we'll see kind of what we can do. But like I said, my goal is to double production from where we are in 2025. As far as the number of trays, and then the capacity, I'm going to probably be working on that and experimenting with that for the next couple years, I
Yeah.
assume, unless things really go gangbusters, then we might be in a different problem next year. We'll talk again, but probably not. I'm thinking we'll probably be in there for a little longer. So the goal is to get the most out of that space for sure.
For sure. Yeah. Like you have, like when you make an investment like that, like the longer it can last, the higher the, the return on it, sort of thing. And what's nice about being in your climate, even though it does get very hot, like, you can do more things outside. Whereas like, in a climate I'm in Canada, there's 3-4 months of the year that you can't even store soil outside, because like, or if you do, you have to bring it in like a week in advance, let it thaw out because it gets so cold. It was minus 24 when I checked the weather, because I'm not in Canada right now, and it's like, man, like it doesn't take very long for a bale of soil to freeze at that temperature. That's Celsius. Sorry. So it's so cold. I don't even know what it is in Fahrenheit. So
it's off the scale on Fahrenheit.
Yeah. So that's awesome. That's great to hear. Like that's a good sized microgreens business. And that's amazing that you can potentially grow to that size without incurring the rent, which is like a huge potential cost of running a microgreens business as you scale. So a garage it can be difficult because it doesn't necessarily hold the temperature the same, especially in colder and really hot climates. But having said that, like if the option is that, or pay a ton of money to move in a commercial facility, like it's a pretty easy choice. Right.
Yeah. So that's my concerns with it are I've got 5 kids, like I mentioned, 4 of which are walking around, and a couple of them that are very curious about what's going on. So we'll see. That's one element that I'm going to have to mitigate, I guess, and be careful on. So, but that's fine, and that's actually a big thing for me with our farm, and that was one of the goals was, not so much like work-life balance, but like integrating the rest of the family into the business as well, and kind of growing something that everybody can be a part of. So there's been the older kids have been involved with pretty much every bit of the process. They're not necessarily awesome to the point where they're like helping all the time with it. But I've had my oldest daughter's 9. And, she's done this, she's measured the seeds out for me. They've mixed trays, they've washed some trays. They don't like that one so much, but, they help, and she knows all the crops and how they smell and how they, how we package them. And she's even come up with ad copy for me that is actually better than sometimes better than I can do even. So, it's exciting, cool. And that's definitely a big motivator for me personally is being able to do that, and not separating those two worlds of work and home, but like trying to bring them together and kind of sort of even grow together as a family that way. So, that's been a challenge, but also, it's right now it's a challenge because they're as young as they are, but as they kind of come up into it, I'm hoping that we'll see some of the benefits from that as well, and sort of get some of the harvest from that as well.
Yeah. I honestly can't think on the top of my head of a better way to like educate children on like the reality of how the world works than like a farm. And then also the work ethic that's required. Like what a great way to teach them that, like, it's something I never really even thought of, because most microgreens businesses, there's a few that are family oriented where the family's running them, but most are I think it's a great way to teach your kids those such valuable skills. Like you think about what I learned in school versus what I learned running a farm. It's night and day. It's not even remotely comparable. Like the reality of how the world works, like you learn it on the spot. It's not like some theoretical thing that may or may not pan out. It's like you learn what works. For example, with ad copy, if your 9-year-old daughter is making ad copy, which is, first of all, it's really cool. Like she'll learn like what works and how to market. Like what a valuable skill set to learn. at any age. It doesn't matter, young, old, doesn't like it's a really valuable skill set
Right.
that can be applied across the board, whether she stays in farming or does anything else in entrepreneurship.
That's right.
So that's really, really cool that they're helping, contributing to the farm, and I think it'll pay dividends beyond like what I think either me or you can fully comprehend at this point. It's something that only time will tell, but I think that's a really cool way, and also the mindset you have about like incorporating business and personal together, because a lot of people separate them, and they separate it sometimes because like they just want to have that clear division, usually because they don't like what they're doing for work. So they want to separate it. But when you enjoy what you're doing, like you naturally want to have people come in and be a part of it, because it's something that brings enjoyment and happiness in your life and other people's lives. So it's a very different way to look at it, but I think it's a much healthier way to look at work and the balance between incorporating personal and life and work life together.
Yeah. It's I remember hearing that, back when you're working a job, you get some of these, entrepreneur gurus or whatever, and they're like, oh, there shouldn't be work-life balance, and you're like, yeah, because you're a workaholic. And then, but on this side of it, you see it and you go, oh yeah, okay, I understand what they're saying more. Yes, it's easy to become a workaholic, but when you realize that your work is it's an important part of who you are and what you're generating, what you're producing, sort of compartmentalizing it. It does work for some people, but I think the more that you can kind of bring, just like when you talk about, you've got your vision of why that you're doing for your business, you should have a similar vision for what you're trying to do with your own self or your family or people around you, right? So having those two aligned, and sort of, if you can get the sailboat going on the same course, right, and doing the same thing, it makes a lot more sense than trying to do two things at once. So
100%.
So yeah, it's again one of those things I don't think you understand till you've stepped through that door. But it makes way more sense to me now than it did even a year ago. So
yeah, for sure. I think experience is like, there's so many things that, like, even just on like personal growth side of things, like you'll hear something or read something in a book, or like there's so many different like methodologies I've used to like try to expand my mind and understand things differently. And it's often only when you actually do it. So for example, like for people that, I was very shy for a very long time, and, exposure therapy is one way that people get through, those fears. And it's only after you expose yourself to these things that you can understand that the fear is self-generated. It's not this external thing that's coming in. It's like you're generating the fear. And like, and once you learn that, then it's a lot easier to like take a step to do whatever it is that you want to do to get out of your comfort zone, as an example. And this applies a lot to business, because people are often, there's a fear of like, what if I don't succeed? Or what if I, what if I have to go get another job after I try to be an entrepreneur, or whatever. And it's only until you try to do it that you understand from a different perspective what the reality of that is. So experience is the best, the way my brain works, at least, experience is the best teacher. Like there's ways to take shortcuts for sure. And they're definitely recommended to take as many shortcuts as you can. But at the end of the day, like experience is a really powerful teacher, and will teach in a way that you will understand personally, in a much deeper way than if someone just tells you how to do something. So there's a combination that makes the most sense from a business, but experience is really powerful. And it sounds like that's been your experiences as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's there's just no substitute for it, for sure. And I think that imitation piece is important when you start, because you get experience on a small scale and we try to do that in our schooling too, right? But it's become such a thing where it's all theoretical, I think. So having that sort of protected experience to start, but then so you get those few building blocks, and then okay, let's try this. But eventually you gotta take that step. You got to go through the door. You got to, whatever metaphor you want to use for it. You got to do it, and you've got to, stick your head out through the whatever to see what's out there. So, but yeah, there's no substitute for it, for sure.
Yeah. And I think a important tie-in to that is if you if you're going to compare yourself or your business to other like the natural tendency is to compare to like my farm to your farm, or you know what I mean, like that's a common occurrence. But a much better metric is like comparing your farm to your farm. Like, where was it 6 months ago? Where is it now? Like, and just for like, not forget about what other people are doing, like try to learn from other people, but don't like compare, because it's like, but it's very much the thief of joy in the process. So compare to yourself. Same thing. Like, I do this in personal growth. Like I look at like, where was I 6 months ago? Where was I a year? Rather than like, where is someone that I admire like now versus then, because you're on a different path. So it's best to compare yourself or your business to the previous version of your business or yourself, rather than comparing it to others. So just something that was a struggle for me for a long time in the early years, was just constantly trying to compare myself. But the more you understand, like, it's you versus you, it's not you versus anyone else. It's you collaborating with other people is really what the reality is. And then the competition is like, how do you make the business better? How do you grow in the way you want to grow? And it's going to be different for everyone. It'll be financial metrics. Some will be quality of product. Some will be like incorporating their family into it. Like, there's so many different ways to think about that. But this has been a incredible episode. Like tons of great advice just on starting a business, transitioning from work. Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear, like, if you can go back through approximately 3 years ago when you started your farm and meet the younger version of yourself, what advice would you give him to set him up for success at that point?
Yeah, it's a tough one because going back to that experience conversation, there's some ways that you can't do it. But I think I think that the biggest thing is I went into it almost cynically, like, we'll see if this is going to work. Like, I see other people are doing this. Like, there's probably something that'll work here. I don't know if it's going to work for me, but I'll give it a try. And I think the biggest shift I've had to make is, and even like when I started with approaching restaurants more, which I always was sort of like, well, I don't really know that world. I'm not really sure how to talk to these people, or whatever else. But you do have to kind of go through it and do it. But that confidence of knowing, like, you're going to put your best effort into something, and the more you do that, the more confidence that you build. Like, you got to kind of trust yourself to be able to do that. Like, nobody's going to hold yourself to a higher standard than you are. First of all. And second of all, like, if you have that confidence in what you're growing, you have confidence in what it can do, and that you are producing something that is providing benefit for people. I think it does help a lot in getting past those hurdles of sometimes even the bad weeks, like knowing, like, this, I'm making something good that's of value that I'm giving to people. Like, I'm not just trying to, scam a buck out of people. Like, I'm actually trying to build something that's real and good and is worthwhile. And having that confidence, and just, same thing, you've got a why. It affects kind of how you do your business. If you have that confidence and you know that going in, it affects how you talk to people and how they perceive what it is that you have. So, not to say there haven't been hard weeks and there's been challenges and those sorts of things, but I think just keeping that sort of mind, that talk in the back of your head going, I think it really helps. And there, even starting out, I think I would have probably grown a little faster than I did if I did that. Because when I started, some of it was almost in spite of myself that they worked, so once I kind of got over that hurdle, I was able to sort of be like, okay. And then when, it's like, all right, maybe we can do this full time. Even with that, it's like, I don't know. And then then you do it, and like I said, it's been a year, and we're still here. So it's I think that's a big one. It's just having confidence in what you're doing and what you're growing, and that it is good, and it's something worthwhile for you and for others.
100%. And I think just from my experience, because like I really struggled with that in the first couple years of running the business, is just not feeling confident in what I was doing in the product. And the more exposure you get to like even something as simply as people saying no, like it might seem counterintuitive, but it gives you more confidence because it doesn't have to have the impact on you. Like you don't have to take it personally if someone says no. You can like try to take a fair approach of, okay, like people are saying no for a reason. What is the reason that people are saying no? Right. And then how do I improve? Like find like in the no's, there's an opportunity there to find out why it's not working for these customers. And then you can turn those no's into yeses pretty fast with the right mindset and the right understanding of like, and then that builds confidence because you all of a sudden that's sometimes even better than just getting yeses up front, because it allows you to overcome challenges. And there's going to be a guaranteed money back guaranteed. There's going to be a long list of challenges in any business you run. So the better able you are to deal with those challenges and turn them into opportunities. That's right. To understand the market better in this example that we're talking about, the better off you'll be in the long run, and the easier it'll be for you. So confidence sometimes takes time. Like again, same thing. The more reps you do in the gym, the more confident you are you can lift heavy weight, and it's the same mentally as it. So just a great takeaway for anyone that may be in a state where they're like, and worried about people saying no and that fear of rejection. That fear of rejection is a really powerful tool to transform how you understand the world and how you can run your business in a very different way than you may be running it now. That will be much more light years more successful than you may have ever even imagined.
That's right. Yeah, they say you can't grow without the no's, right? Like you have to have those no's to be able to take those steps up. Like that's when you hit that wall, that's where it's like, okay, what am I going to do to fix this? Or am I not? Right. And if you're not, like that's where you make that choice. You have to make that choice. Absolutely.
100%. Yeah. And like you can decide if it's not for you at that point. But like what I would recommend is like, even if you think this may not be something you want to do long term, it's still better to try to overcome those challenges, because it builds confidence just in general, because you're being the person that ideally who you want to be, rather than it might be like, hey, it's depending on the point of life you're in, maybe it's like I'd rather just chill and not focus on growth, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just like if it's just to figure out what is an alignment for you and how you want to show up, and that will build confidence. So it doesn't have to be like getting over fears if that's not something that is aligned with that. But most people generally feel good, overcoming challenges. Like I feel like it's very it's very human. It's how we got to where we are now in society, and like
absolutely.
But yeah, this has been an amazing episode. It was really fun to chat with you and hear more about your story and all the good things that are happening in your business. If listeners want to connect more with you or learn more about your farm, where can they find you online and on social media?
Yeah. So pretty much everything has Spartanburg Microgreens in it. So we're not super creative on that front, but makes it easy, right? So SpartanburgMicrogreens.com is our website. Then Instagram is at Spartanburg Microgreens, and same thing for Facebook. And that's kind of the three that we have. So awesome. Search for Spartanburg Microgreens. You should be able to find us. If all our SEO stuff is working like it's supposed to, it should be able to get there. So
we'll put notes in the description so people can find that there as well.
Perfect.
But yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Kyle, and I'm excited to share this wisdom that you have with other farmers.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks for tuning in to the Microgreens Mastery Podcast. To access a wealth of insights, just click the subscribe button, stay notified about each new episode, and enjoy all of this wisdom for free. If you're ready to supercharge your microgreens business, visit microgreensconsulting.com for a gold mine of guides and resources. We've transformed thousands of microgreens businesses, and you're invited to join the success story. Let's stay connected. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Microgreens Consulting for exclusive content and expert tips and wisdom. If you found this episode insightful, please leave us a review, spread the word, and let's share microgreens magic with the world. Until next time, let curiosity fuel your growth and may happiness be your harvest. Happy growing, everyone.